The number one thing that I always will tell people that are in similar situations to what I've encountered is take care of yourself. You've got to get yourself well, and you've got to be honest with yourself. I wasn't honest with myself for the 3 years when I was going through that addiction. I couldn't look myself in the face and say, dude, you've got a problem and you've got to correct this. Addicts are very good at justifying things, rationalizing things, and painting a picture that they find a way to accept.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Adapt You podcast. I'm incredibly humbled to have on our show today an old friend and a phenomenal guest. Today, we're going to be interviewing somebody by the name of Dominick Grieco. I know him as Dom Grieco. Dom and I actually used to work together over 20 years ago at our first sales jobs right out of college for a company called ADP. We sold payroll services. It was a great job to get because it was a launching pad into other medical careers or other sales careers that typically were in the medical space. So that's where a lot of people wanted to start. And Dom and I worked together. We worked at two different offices. And over the last 20 years, we've lost touch. And a lot has happened in Dom's life that is incredibly impressive from a success perspective, from how he's grown an incredible career with a medical device company, how he's had a beautiful family, has a beautiful family with two amazing sons, but he's done all of this while battling two incredible curveballs that life has thrown at him that forced him to change, forced him to make adaptations, and forced him to react. Dom was in a car accident when we used to work together at ADP, where he's ejected from the car. And in that car accident, that almost ended his life, actually ended up saving his life, because from a post-crash CT scan, they identified that he actually had a brain tumor that needed to be removed. He talks about the struggles of the brain tumor, how it removed certain part of his brain, and some of the struggles that he went through, from learning how to write again to, having issues with balance, MRSA infections, adrenal gland failure, and a really, really challenging recovery that he managed to get through to start to skate into what was a beautiful part of his life. We had tremendous continued success in his career and as a father and as a husband, until life threw him another curveball. And that same accident wreaked havoc on him, where he had a tremendous back pain, which led to multiple surgeries and what ended up being a 3+ year opioid addiction that he kept from everybody and somehow managed to get through. It's an incredible story of addiction. It's an incredible story of perseverance. It's an incredible story of how he was able to manage these difficult changes in his life to continue to stay on the straight and narrow and continue to stay focused despite these challenges. So it's super humble to have Dom on the show. All right, Dom, welcome to the show, man. So good to hear from you, see you. It's been way too long.
Thank you so much, Derek. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned in the intro, Dom and I actually know each other. It has been nearly 2 decades, as I was just reminded by him, that we've actually really had a conversation. But we used to work together back at a company where we sold payroll services back in the good old days. That's kind of where you started as a salesperson, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Dom, it's wild. I remember, as I mentioned in the intro, when things sort of took a turn south for you back when we were at ADP, the payroll company. I don't mind saying their name now. And I remember when you got in that car accident. It's kind of fuzzy. So for the listeners, kind of tell us a little bit about that moment and kind of what went down.
Sure. Life up to that point had been pretty rosy. I was a young guy just getting out, not too far out of college. Had my first opportunity with a very good company in a sales career. Was actually out that day, selling payroll in my rural territory on a country highway, a 2-lane highway, middle of the day, beautiful day. And all of a sudden a car slips over into my lane and hits me head on. I was ejected from the car. I wasn't buckled in. I've learned a lot since then, but I was ejected from the car. had a pretty significant head injury, ended up going to the hospital for that. When they did do the CAT scan on my head, they did determine that I had a brain tumor on my cerebellum. So prior to that, no symptoms of the tumor. It was a shock to me. It was a shock to everybody around me. But, that's how that beautiful, summer afternoon ended for me.
That's crazy. I mean, you think about that, the fact that you didn't wear your seatbelt, the fact that you were ejected from the car, which then caused a pretty significant head injury, saved your life. Because you probably had some, I would imagine you had some scans that then made them aware. Like if you wore your seatbelt and your face hit the steering wheel a little bit or an airbag, no scan, right?
Correct. And it was one of those situations. I remember I was kind of going to stop to get a bottle of water or something like that at a convenience store. I clicked off the seatbelt to reach in the back seat to grab my briefcase where my wallet was, and seconds after that, I looked up and the accident occurred. So to your point, it was horrible the way it went. But had I not had, had I had the seatbelt on and not had the head injury, I may not have caught the tumor in time to have a happy ending.
Now, how old are you at this point?
Be 50 in a few months.
When the accident happened, my apologies. How old were you then?
Late 20s.
So late 20s, married at this point?
Had just gotten married. Literally
just gotten married
before that accident. Yeah.
So you're newlywed, you got a pretty dope job, making some pretty good money, selling payroll services, and boom, go through, you got a head injury. Now, what was the extent of the head injury? Like what actually were you dealing with that caused them to kind of go to a deeper level of scan?
When I was ejected from the car, I had actually hit my head on the sunroof. Then I was thrown into the back seat, and I hit my head again when I was thrown out of the car. So I definitely had a concussion, all signs and symptoms of the concussion, and that's what precipitated the CAT scan.
Wow. So now you're any other injuries other than a concussion? Any other broken bones or
broken
injuries?
bones? Yeah, just cuts and bruises.
So now you find out that you have a brain tumor. And how far after the accident is this discovered? I mean, it's just a couple of days after?
Literally hours. Literally hours.
So you've just survived a pretty nasty accident. You're probably knocked unconscious. What kind of explain the scene in the hospital where they walk in and because the first time because we've had other people on the show, other guests on the show, and I asked them what the low point is. And they're like, when they tell you have cancer, like that moment where they come in and they say that, like, and I mean, was this like oh shit? Like,
yeah, Derek, I don't remember all the details, but what I do remember is being notified of this and the doctor telling me what they found. Initially there's disbelief, but within seconds, I was nauseous to the point of, just wanting to curl up and get sick. And it really took hours of kind of being in that despair and feeling nauseous to kind of wrap my head around what was going on, and to try to look forward and find some optimism. Everything happened so quickly. It was nauseating at the very least.
So after the accident, you find out, and now you immediately have to go from what you thought was just going to be some post-concussion therapy into something that's a lot more involved in the treatment of a brain cancer, which I think a lot of people unfortunately automatically assume is a death sentence. What level of cancer, what severity were you dealing with, and then what were the options that were served up to you once you were diagnosed?
I'm going to clarify it because it wasn't a cancer diagnosis, quote unquote. It was, okay, there's a tumor in your brain and we need to get it out of there to find out what it is. I had the surgery to remove the tumor about a week after the accident. At that point, it was determined that it was a low-grade astrocytoma. So it's more fell into the benign brain tumor category than the cancerous brain tumor category. What it could have become, nobody knows. but anyway, it was, approximately the size of a golf ball, and it had to come out of there.
And where was it located?
It was
In the tumor?
at the base of my cerebellum. And unfortunately, it was a successful removal of the tumor, but I had some significant neurological issues as a result of that. The entire right side of my body was affected. To this day, my balance is still affected. Proprioception is affected. And a quick explanation of proprioception is just spatial awareness of my hands or my feet. And the further my hand gets away from my body, the less contact it would have with my brain. That was very pronounced initially. That's gotten better over time, but it still persists. I lost total ability to write with my right hand. To this day, I'm more of a lefty than a righty because I learned to do so much with my left. So there was a lot involved in post-operatively with that surgery. I think I explained to you when we were discussing this early on that I was taken off these steroids too quickly that I was given post-operatively. That caused my adrenal glands to fail, which put me back in ICU with adrenal failure. It took several months for my adrenal glands to get back to function. The other result of being on those steroids is I went from about 165 pounds at the time of the accident to about 225 pounds, literally less than 2 months later. Wow. So it basically took all the lean muscle that I worked so hard to build and turned it into fat plus some. This almost sounds made up, but during all this, I was also diagnosed with MRSA. So I had a surgical staph infection as a result, which ended up putting me back in ICU, putting me back in the operating room for 2 more surgeries to drain it. So this whole surgical process was about 3 weeks in the hospital total. And, the recovery and the adrenal glands and everything else was another, several weeks and several months and even a couple of years before I could get my fitness level back.
Okay. So you spent weeks in the hospital, you went through a MRSA infection, adrenal failure, you put on all this weight. And I mean, that's a complete reversal or 180 from where your life once was, right? To where, here you are in your late 20s, newlywed, got a killer job, and now you're dealing with spatial awareness. You're dealing with the inability to use the right side, or I should say a reduced ability with the right side of your body. You're a right-handed person, I would assume, up until this point. So now you're having to learn to use your left hand. All that change was just sort of thrown on your lap. You didn't choose this, right? This wasn't something that you wanted or desired. Like, what was that adjustment like? Is it just, did it bring you into a level of sadness, or did it upset you, or were you just reacting and just triaging at that point when everything was going on? Like, where's your headspace?
Yeah. And when everything was going on, all I wanted was everything to be back to normal. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to get back to living my life, get back to work. Nothing was more important to me than just getting back to some form of normal. And there was several setbacks along that way and through that process that made things very difficult. But the support system I had professionally, the folks at ADP that really didn't know me that well at that time were extremely supportive, you being one of those guys. And I had a tremendous family, and obviously my wife. It'd be remiss if I didn't mention her. The rock that she was through this whole process can't be understated.
Yeah, and that's now that entire process from the time that you were in the accident to the time where you would say your adrenals returned to normal. You felt as close as you could to normal after the accident. Like, how long of a time period was that you had to go through that struggle?
A good 6 months plus.
Yeah, I remember this. But it's funny, 6 months in my time frame, because our offices where we work together were kind of 3 hours apart from each other. It seemed like a much shorter time period. I remember you getting in the accident, and then I remember so many months later, we were in a golf tournament together. And I recall like it happened yesterday. We were sharing a golf cart, and I think you must have had, one got away from you a little bit and was like kind of like up on a berm somewhere, and we had pulled the cart up, and it was kind of at an awkward angle, and you had to get out to take your shot, and then you came back, and just it was because the cart was awkwardly parked. You had to like duck to kind of get your head inside of the golf cart as somebody of your height would, and you hit your head. And at that point, I realized, because I wasn't that close to you, how serious that was for you, because you had been through so much. You'd been through the brain surgeries, you'd been through the infections. Like you were pissed. Like I remember you hitting the golf cart, being like, and cursing at it, just because you were so upset that you hit your head. And now it makes a lot more sense to me, because at first I was thought to myself, like, wow, like maybe why are you so pissed off? But now knowing what you went through, something as small as just knocking your head can, that effect that it could have had on you, given the fragile state that you were just recovering, it now makes sense. So
and that could have very well been one of those things where, okay, under normal circumstances, I would have never hit my head, but because of the balance and because of the other issues, those things are happening. So extremely frustrating at the time. I was a young guy. I was always an athlete. The last thing I ever expected was to maybe have trouble, putting one foot in front of the other at times.
It could have been a beer we were drinking on the golf cart too. I'm just saying, it might have been that. So, but what's amazing is that I remember you being a phenomenal golfer despite having gone through all of this. So like, as an athlete, I can attest to the fact that I didn't realize that you didn't have full functioning use of one side of your body, yet you're still out there crushing drives. So that's pretty impressive, having known that now. So I probably would have taken a little easier on you when we were out there. So now that you're 6 months out, and in your things are getting back to some normalcy for you, you're starting to get into that groove of life. Did you get back? I'm making an assumption here. Was there a period of time where you're really able to now focus on your career, focus on your marriage, and growing a family?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say, surgery was 98. And then 2001, my oldest son was born, my first son, who's now, going on 21. My second son was born in 2003. So that 5-6 years after I got my feet back under me after the brain surgeries was very prosperous. I excelled in the job I had. I was able to secure a job in the medical device sector, which I still have today. I'm still with the same company 20 years later. I've had a very good career with them, but things were very good from, I would say 2000 through, later in the decade, maybe 2008 was when things really started to go south with some other issues I had physically.
Yeah. So you tasted some of that success, and you're able to sort of to rebound tremendously. And I remember that. I remember seeing you be a complete and utter star at ADP, obviously so much so that you were recruited into the medical industry, like a lot of folks who start at that career follow that pathway I did. And I remember, when you moved on to that company, the fact that you're still there 20 years later, obviously is a testament to your success, right? I mean, a company will not keep you, especially in a sales and sales management capacity, unless you're doing your job and hitting the number. So you are a proverbial dinosaur in that industry, because there's not many folks like you that are able to have that type of longevity. It's impressive.
Thank you.
So you talk about, you hit your groove, things are going smooth. Kids are in the mix now. One thing I've known from you, and having known you, is that family is incredibly important to you, and being an active and engaged father is incredibly important to you. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's at this point when my boys are, grown men, essentially, 20, 21 and 18, I wish I can get back some of that time, but I do not regret any of it. I did my best to maintain a basically a traveling salesman career. And, when you're young in it, you're going to do whatever you have to do to succeed, which takes you away from home quite a bit. But somehow, some way, I found a way to be present when I was at home. And, I have two very distinguished sons that I'm extremely proud of to show for it. So I wouldn't change much of that. Around that time, we're talking that period when they were in their young years, we did, move into a bigger house, take on more responsibility, which, gave me a little more fire to get out there and continue to excel in my career. It was a very busy, very prosperous time for us.
So talk to me about 2000, I think you said it was 2007, where things sort of took a little bit of a negative turn. So after you've kind of hit your stride and you're crushing it, life throws you another curveball.
Yeah, I started to have some back problems. And I think in large part, those back problems were the result of that car accident. I'd also had a lifetime of playing competitive sports. I was a hockey player most of my life right into college, a weightlifter at times, plus you throw that accident on top of it. I started to have some back problems around that 2006, 2007 timeframe. I remember one day I was at work getting ready to go into the operating room. I bent over to put a shoe cover on and my back went out. And anytime my back had bothered me in the past, within a couple of days or a week or so, you feel better and you get on moving. I never got better. I ended up with pain in my hips, ultimately pain in my legs, both legs, pain, numbness didn't go away. Ultimately ended up with me sometime in 2008 having a spinal procedure. I had a microdiscectomy laminectomy that kind of created some relief and allowed me to rehab and get better. One thing I didn't mention is I started taking pain medications when the pain in my legs started back in 2007. And there started a very long journey of narcotic pain meds to kind of control things.
So you had the back surgery, and prior to the back surgery, and afterwards, you had to start taking pain medications. And it sounds like you're taking a controlled substance, an opioid.
Oh, yeah, and it started, and I'll talk details, and the
Please.
people who understand this will understand it. But I think I started with Tylenol, with codeine, progressed to hydrocodone, then oxycodone, and then was morphine. The pain was so bad at the beginning, I needed all that stuff. And then I had surgery and I was prescribed more of that. I had several doctors in my life that were enablers at the time. My primary care doctor always filled my prescriptions and my requests. When I would go see the neurosurgeon, I would con them into giving me a refill. I think things have changed a lot today, but back 10 plus years ago, there wasn't as much scrutiny over prescribing of opioids. So I was basically able to get all I wanted for as long as I wanted.
So how long were you taking prescription pain medications for, and how bad did the addiction get for you? Were you taking them every day?
Well, I'll just give you a little bit of this perspective. I had the surgery in 2008. I started taking them about 6 months prior to that surgery. I had a second round of back surgery in 2010. The first surgery I had in 2008, as hard as I tried to rehab, I just never got there. And ultimately, I started going backwards. I found a new surgeon. I had a very successful surgery in 2010. So we're talking a period of 2.5+ years where I was on some form of narcotic pain medication. And over that 2.5 years, it became, I'm not going to take this every day. I'm going to hoard this. And I'm going to take this as much as I need to take to avoid withdrawals, because it was withdrawals from the pain meds that I didn't want to deal with. They were very uncomfortable. You've heard people tell stories about things crawling under your skin, the most uncomfortable you could ever be. That's what the withdrawals were like. I couldn't be present. I couldn't be a husband. I couldn't be a father. I couldn't go to work if I was having withdrawals. So everything I was doing was designed to avoid withdrawals. But the problem came in when my tolerance got high. So there were days where I would go maybe 2 days without taking anything, and then take 2 days worth of medication in one day. Then that became 3 days, and I was taking 3 days of medication in one day. So I would go 2 days without. On that third day, I might take a handful, and ultimately 15 or even 20 pills of OxyContin or hydrocodone, depending on what I had and what the doses were.
Wow. And I've never taken one of those pills before. I shouldn't. I took a Loratab once because a flag football injury, and then I felt like very strange, so I put them all down the toilet because they scared me. But when you hear a handful of pills like that, I would imagine. And I know your tolerance is built up, and and obviously you're an athlete. You've got a great metabolism. What does that do to you? Did that just stop you from having that kind of creepy crawly skin feeling, or did that just like floor you, where like you just felt nothing? Like, how do you go from taking nothing for days to taking a handful? Like, I have to imagine that's a pretty stiff effect on you all at once. And in answering that question, did the people around you, we'll answer that question first, and let's talk about those who are you're surrounded by.
Yeah, there's definitely a euphoria associated with taking the meds. And, the first time, like you said, you take that one Loratab, there's a euphoric effect that you're going to feel with it. You're going to feel high in a lot of ways. For me, there was that euphoria, but the reason why I continued to take those meds is they would take the pain away. Once the pain was gone, it was back to, okay, there's euphoria associated with this, but if I don't take it, I'm going to get right back to having these withdrawals again. The impact of taking a handful of pills ultimately was no different than the impact of the first one I took when I was okay with just taking one. And you started to ask about the people around me. Nobody really knew, because when I was taking these things, I couldn't take them at work. I was working through this whole process when I wasn't recovering from surgery. I was in the operating room. I had to be present. I had to be able to think quick on my feet. When I'm taking these medications, I'm not going to be able to respond quickly and accurately and efficiently and safely. So I couldn't take them when I was working. So a lot of times when I was taking these meds, it was after work. It was, at 5 o'clock, or even if I could hold on until closer to bedtime. Nobody really knew what I was going through. I remember several nights laying in bed saying, I may have overdone it. I hope I wake up tomorrow. And that's how bad things had gotten, where, I'm going to throw chance to the wind here. I'm going to take all this stuff. And if I make it, I make it. If I don't, I don't. And, at that point, it was, okay, I'm in big trouble here. I need some help.
Wow. So when you, and that makes sense. I appreciate you adding clarity to that after your tolerance got a little bit larger, you could tolerate taking a fistful of pills because it was equivalent of taking that one. And it sounds like you said, you took them at night. And then during the day, as the pills would wear off, you were able to function, be quick on your feet, be able to function in the operating room, because in your 20-year career, you've excelled the entire time, year over year, President's Club winner, somebody that continues to excel. So for these 3 some odd years, you didn't lose your job, right?
Quite the opposite, Derek. I mean, I had some of my better sales performance years during that time, because my focus was, okay, I'm a single income household. I've got to earn it, regardless of the circumstances. After family, number one priority is success at work, and at all costs. So if I had to suffer through the day in pain, or I had to suffer through the day feeling, oh no, one of the withdrawals is going to start, so be it. I had a job to do. And from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., that's the only focus I had.
Is that part of the reason why you kind of kept it to yourself and kept it quiet, is you didn't want people to know so that you could continue to provide, for fear of maybe that having to stop because of rehab or whatever other options, or how did you, why did you keep it to yourself?
I think a large part was I was ashamed at what I was doing. And I think a normal addict's behavior is to kind of be on the down low, quote unquote. I don't want anybody to know what I'm dealing with. That could jeopardize my ability to continue to secure these pills and maintain my addiction. It could potentially get me in trouble, with my employer. I taking pain medications pre-surgery and post-surgery to recover, nobody's going to have an argument with. But when you're 6 months down the road and physically I'm doing much better and everybody could see me and see the level of fitness I have, how do I explain my dependence on pain medication? I was ashamed of it.
That makes total sense. I commend you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people, they wouldn't, the fact that I think a lot of addicts, you're right, they want to do what they can to maintain that status quo, for fear of, like, I think as you'd reference, you didn't want to stop because you knew what would come from it, I would imagine, in that withdrawal process. And it sounds like that was your motivation, at least as you described it before, for continuing to do it. You just take just enough for you to stop you from going through that process, because and could you feel that process coming on? Could you tell, like, okay, it's time for more pills, or like, how did you know, like, it was time to swallow more?
Yeah, I could, it's almost a sixth sense in an addict's mind where, it's time. It's an hour from now is not going to be pretty if I don't, take care of this. And when it came to the point where, okay, I'm healed up, and one thing I do very well is rehabilitate myself. Whether it was after the brain surgery where I forced myself to learn how to write again, or after the back surgeries where there was 100% commitment to physical recovery, regardless of how uncomfortable that got. Once all that stuff was behind me and my tolerance was as high as it was with the narcotics, I had basically a opportunity. I don't know if it was an epiphany, I don't know what it was, but it was simply, if I don't change this right now, it's not going to end well. One of these mornings, I'm not going to be waking up, that it's not going to pass like it always has. Or worse, I'm going to have to go onto the black market to continue to supply my habit. So once I got to that point, I had a discussion with my primary care doctor to say, listen, I'm at your mercy. I'm addicted. I need help. Fortunately, my doctor felt some responsibility for the situation I was in. Mm-hmm. He referred me to another doctor locally that prescribes a drug called Suboxone, which is very similar to methadone replacement. It basically provides all the benefits that the opiates were without the euphoria. And it provided me with a very, very strict protocol to wean myself off them. That process took about 5 months. But I ultimately did it. And here we are 11 years later, and there has not been a problem since.
Wow. So the Suboxone is, for those who don't understand it, and for those who are listening that could benefit from such a treatment, we'll put some information in the show notes, because the Suboxone and the Suboxone clinics are something that help a lot of people come off prescription opioid addictions. Spent a great number of years in my career selling laboratory services for urine toxicology testing to see if people were appropriately taking their opioids, because it's such a national epidemic. I think it's something like 95% of the world's opioids are prescribed in the US. Most countries, you can't get these drugs as readily available as you can get them here in the US. So, there are many professionals that have fallen in similar situations that you have, that unfortunately their story didn't end as well. So take me back for a minute to that moment where you sort of had that, okay, I got to stop moment. Was it a just enough was enough? You had a moment in the mirror with yourself? Was it a situation where supply was running out and you're like, all right, I got to take a different direction here? Like, I'm always interested to know at what point somebody makes a decision, a conscious decision to change, right? Again, you were thrown some shit, right? You were thrown this back pain, another result of the car accident. You were forced to change, you were forced to adjust, but you had to make a conscious decision to change. Like, tell me about that moment. Let's dive a little deeper into that for a minute, if you could.
Yeah, and ultimately it came down to, I have to do something different. I'm tired of lying to people. I'm tired of going to 3 different doctors to try to get these filled. I'm tired of the uncomfortable denial at the pharmacy because I was too soon to get something filled. I was tired of laying in bed at night thinking, oh no, I may not wake up tomorrow. I was tired of fearing withdrawals. I was tired of, searching under the bed for a pill I might have dropped. There was just no end to the, just the oppressive nature of the addiction of, okay, I've got 100 pills. I've got 30 days till I can refill this. How am I going to make these pills last? I was doing Excel spreadsheets, Derek, to basically point out or map out how I was going to get through the month with the supply I had.
Wow.
And that included basically a diary with how long I could go without having withdrawals, to knowing exactly how long it was going to be before I can get that refilled. It was too much. Either I'm going to end up dead or I'm going to end up in jail. There's no other way this is going to go. That's when I had to have that discussion. And I probably knew that for several months before I came clean on it.
So all the while where you're going through this, you're keeping a diary, and I appreciate the great detail that you're sharing all this story, because I think there's a lot of folks that are listening that may be doing the same thing, and experiencing something similar, and they could relate to this story. And, the fact that you went through all of that and still maintained a professional career and your status as a father. You kept this to yourself, right? Those around you didn't know, which obviously I'm making an assumption here that you continued to put your family first and made them a priority in your life.
Absolutely. I would, again, looking back on it, I wouldn't change anything. I think it made me a better person. I think the experience made me a better father, made me a better husband. And ultimately, it reinforced that I do have a work ethic that's going to allow me to stay gainfully employed and continue to progress the career that I've taken on.
Yeah, because it's a lot. I think a lot of people would have folded under that pressure, not only as a father and as a husband, but also from a professional career. So it's impressive that not only through an opioid addiction, but also through multiple brain surgeries, you've continued to stay the course. You've continued to stay focused as a father, as a husband, and as somebody who has a professional career. So I want to fly the plane up a little bit higher and just talk about that for a second, because that's what's most impressive about all this. I mean, your story is hard to listen to be honest with you, just because of all the struggles that you've gone through, but how you've maintained victorious in the things that matter, and done so while managing everything you manage. Look, how did you do it? How did you stay focused through both of those situations and still stay on the rails?
I think there was a lot of luck in there. But, my focus never, my main priorities and my main focus has never changed. It was being a good father, being a husband, maintaining a household, growing a career. I just didn't want to be employed. I wanted to continue to succeed. I've had several promotions over my 20 years with the company I'm with. I've had, just superstar performance years based on the numbers. But the most important things for me were just to continue to thrive, continue to progress, continue to be well. When you go through things that I went through with the brain and then with the spine, and always being an athlete and an active person, the hardest part about all of that was not being able to do. And I didn't, I never lost sight of, okay, I'm going to rehab from this. I'm laying in my hospital bed. I'm going to rehab from this in 6 months. I'm going to be out west. I'm going to be climbing a mountain. I'm going to be doing something that I've always enjoyed doing. I never want to get to the point where I can't. And when you're down, when I was down with the back, whether it was down recovering from back surgery, down, with pain and addiction, um, the one thing that drove me most after my family and everything at home was just being able to get out there and do, and being physically capable of doing. And to take it a step further, with our jobs, or with the, you've been in this field before, but in these sales jobs where you're traveling a lot and you're up in the OR early, you're working late, you're in 3 different hotels during the week, you're on 3 different plane flights. It takes a significant amount of physical energy to do that. I not only wanted to have the energy to do it, I wanted to have more energy than anybody else doing it. I wanted to have more stamina and more endurance. So never losing sight of all those things, regardless of how defeated I was at the moment, was the key.
So that drive that you have, and thanks for sharing that, the drive that you have, it sounds like it was heavily rooted in obviously family and career, but a big part of that was your ability to stay active, to do, right? You're a physical person, you're an athlete, you're somebody that enjoys being out there and using their body, and you were sidelined twice with some pretty significant injuries that stopped you from doing that, which as an athlete myself, I haven't gone through struggles of my own, not to this level. I can relate and understand to how frustrating that can be, and how angry that can make you. When you see somebody running down the street and you want to run, right? Your son is going to the gym and you can't go with him, right? Those moments I'm sure occurred. So what were the daily activities that you did, and I would imagine continue to do today, that you stuck with, that got you back to normalcy? Obviously you rehabbed in these situations. Like, what's your mental mindset, whether it be through the addiction or, the physical rehabilitation that kept you on track and got you back on track? Like what was your recipe? Cause you've used it now a couple of times.
Yeah, I've been a cyclist since I was a kid. I mean, I raced BMX bikes when I was a kid. I got into road cycling after I put on all that weight after the complications from the brain surgery. To this day, road cycling is still my primary fitness activity. It's my primary outlet. I try to ride more miles each year than I did the previous year. Obviously, with the years where I was down with the back problems and back surgery, one thing that kept me focused was I need to get back on that bike. I'm thinking of routes, I'm thinking of certain hills that I climbed. All I want to do is get back on that hill or get back on that descent. So I still do a considerable amount of riding. Very simply, the other thing, and I feel, and for anybody going through rehab from back surgery or rehab from back problems, it's amazing how much physical benefit you can get from walking, just simply walking. And I remember specifically both surgeries, taking my first walk after those surgeries in the hospital. And even though it was only maybe 15 feet out and 15 feet back or even less, that was the start of it. I remember after the second surgery, I went for I think it was my 2-week checkup after back surgery. And my surgeon just, how you doing? What have you been up to? I'm like, great, I've been walking a ton. He goes, how much you walking? I said, well, I'm up to 5 miles a day. He said, 5 miles a day? You just had surgery 2 weeks ago. But I'm walking. I don't care if it takes me 2 hours to walk 5 miles, I'm going to walk it. So just moving. Ultimately, everything I did was to get me back on that bike. I knew once I got back on the bike, everything, that was going to be an indication that I've made it. So that's to awesome. This moment, if it wasn't raining out, I'd be finding time to get out on the bike this evening. So
that's awesome. I'd forgotten that we share in that passion of the bike. As a cyclist myself, I will have to chat more about that after the show. So, Badab, what advice would you give to people right now that are faced with challenges in their life similar to yours, physical challenges, a drug addiction, that have a career, have a family or both to maintain, and they're going through a similar struggle, right? They've been continually knocked down, like you were with infections and adrenal failure and opioid addiction. You've had a lot of curveballs thrown at you, but you've continued to crawl out of that hole and follow a recipe, which you just described. What advice or wisdom can you give to people that are going through something similar to sort of keep them on the horse, right? To keep them, to help them develop that recipe for success so they can ultimately recover.
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing that I always will tell people that are in similar situations to what I've encountered is take care of yourself. You've got to get yourself well, and you've got to be honest with yourself. I wasn't honest with myself for the 3 years when I was going through that addiction. I couldn't look myself in the face and say, dude, you've got a problem and you've got to correct this. Addicts are very good at justifying things, rationalizing things, and painting a picture that they find a way to accept instead of looking at it for what it is and addressing it. In my situation, I didn't get better until I came clean with that. I was honest with myself, and most importantly, I asked for help. People are willing to help you. If you're willing to get well, you're going to find a ton of support in that endeavor. But until you can come clean with yourself, be honest with yourself that you need to get yourself well, you're going to continue to repeat the process, as I did for many, many months.
So becoming honest with yourself, and then ultimately, at that point, having the courage to ask for help is really the advice that you would give.
Absolutely. And that's just on the self-wellness part, and from the addiction perspective, from the perspective of rehabbing and healing from surgery, or coming back from a very, very desperate time in your life, which if you're having back surgery, you are in a very bad place, mentally, physically, everything. It is not the first line treatment. It's often when you have no choice. I often tell people that they're looking at back surgery, it's the scariest thing in the world. But when you are ready for it, you're going to be fine with it, and you're going to look forward to having it done. Because at some point, you get tired of not getting better. You get tired of failing, not getting better. You think you're getting better. It's one step forward and 2 steps back. You have a couple of good days, 3 bad days. After surgery, there's nothing but improvement. Every single day is an improvement if you are willing to dedicate yourself to getting better. I mentioned walking 15 feet or walking 30 feet. The next day it's 35 feet, and then 40 feet, and then 100 feet, and then on down the road we go. The human body is extremely resilient, and with the right mindset and the right dedication and the right support, I think we can recover from just about anything that life can throw at us. So be true to yourself, and never stop putting one foot in front of the other, because there's always better days ahead.
I love it. Dom, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, reconnecting with you. 20 years. We need to talk more than every 2 decades. Let's make a promise to each other that we won't wait until we're like in our 70s to have this discussion again. And your story is remarkable. I think it's so inspiring and uplifting to hear somebody that is on the surface been completely successful in both their career and as a family man, but really went through some incredible struggles. And you will absolutely serve as an inspiration to so many by sharing your story and being willing to be honest with us about what you went through and about addiction. I can't thank you enough for being on the show today and sharing all that with everybody.
Derek, thanks for the opportunity. I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a private person. Even people close to me haven't heard a lot of what I talked about today. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this. And I very much hope that that at least somebody out there can benefit from what we've talked about today.
I think so many will. Thank you, Dom.
Thank you, Derek.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Adapt You podcast today. Our goal with this show and all of our content is to deliver you the guests and the respective knowledge necessary to help you change something in your life. Everyone who listens to this show has something they want to affect and something they want to change. And our goal is to help give you the knowledge necessary to take you down that path on becoming the absolute best version of yourself. If you like what you heard today, please tune in to all of our shows and also check us out in social media. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, and check out our website and have some great content on there as well. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next show.